What if I told you that Michael Jackson's genius wasn't a gift? We see the unbelievable talent, the global icon, the king of pop, and we think, he was just born different. We see the physics-defying dance moves, we hear the voice that defined a generation, and we witness a level of superstardom that may never be reached again. And in seeing all that, we create a myth, the myth of the effortless prodigy, the myth of a magic that just was. But that's not the whole story. That myth, in fact, does a massive disservice to the man himself, because behind the curtain of perceived perfection was a machine of relentless work. Michael Jackson had a secret blueprint for mastering any skill he chose, a powerful system of learning, and a mindset that took him from a gifted child to a global legend. He didn't just have talent, he had a process. A systematic, repeatable, and deeply intentional method for achieving greatness. And in this video, we're pulling back that curtain. We're not just going to admire the magic, we're going to dissect the method. We're breaking down the exact blueprint so you can apply his legendary approach to learning in your own life. This isn't about becoming the next king of pop. It's about understanding that the path to mastery in any field isn't reserved for a chosen few. It's a path that can be learned. The myth of innate genius. Before we can break down Michael's blueprint, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the whole idea of genius. As a culture, we're obsessed with it. We love the story of the overnight success, the savant who can play Mozart without a lesson, the artist who creates a masterpiece on their first try. It's romantic, sure, but it's also incredibly damaging. Why? Because when we label something as pure, God-given talent, we automatically put it in a box labeled unattainable. It becomes something to marvel at, but not something to learn from. It builds a wall between them and us. We become passive spectators to their greatness, rather than active students of their process. We look at a figure like Michael Jackson and think, I could never do that. And in doing so, we give ourselves an excuse to not even try. We let ourselves off the hook. The public narrative around Michael Jackson often fell into this exact trap. He was either portrayed as an otherworldly being touched by a divine spark, or reduced to tabloid caricatures. The conversation rarely focused on the grueling, systematic, and almost fanatical work that was the true engine of his success. People saw the moonwalk, but they didn't see the thousands of hours of solitary practice that forged it. They heard the flawless vocals on Thriller, but they weren't privy to the endless takes and obsessive refinement in the studio. But the people who were there, the ones who saw behind the curtain, tell a very different story. They don't talk about magic, they talk about work. Quincy Jones, the legendary producer who collaborated with Michael on his most iconic albums, recalled the painstaking process of mixing Billie Jean. After 91 mixes, Quincy simply asked to hear the second one again. That second mix, he declared, was the one. It wasn't about luck. It was about an exhaustive process of elimination until the perfect emotional cocktail was achieved. Longtime engineer Bruce Swedien reinforced this, stating, I've worked with major forces in the music industry, and I think Michael was perhaps the top of the heap there. Serious is a mild expression. He had a passion for the music. This wasn't a man coasting on talent. This was a man obsessed with his craft. In a 1987 interview, Michael himself said, a lot of people are so used to just seeing the outcome of work. They never see the side of the work you go through to produce the outcome. And that is the fundamental shift in mindset we have to make. Michael Jackson's career isn't a story about the limitations of our own potential. It's a testament to the outer limits of what focused human effort can achieve. It's not about waiting for a lightning bolt of inspiration. It's about building a system. So if it wasn't just a gift from the heavens, what was it? It was a blueprint, a learnable method for mastery built on 3 core pillars that anyone, including you, can use to learn any skill. The first, and perhaps most important, is what we'll call obsessive deconstruction. Pillar 1, obsessive deconstruction, the student of the greats. The first pillar of the Michael Jackson way of learning is the foundation for everything else, obsessive deconstruction. Michael was arguably one of the most dedicated students in the history of entertainment. He had an unwavering belief in a simple but powerful principle he often repeated: study the greats and become greater. But what does study really mean? For Michael, it wasn't just watching a movie or listening to a song. It was an active, almost forensic analysis. It was about breaking down the masters to their fundamental parts, understanding the mechanics behind their magic, and identifying the ingredients that made their work timeless. He was a reverse engineer of greatness. Let's look at his most obvious canvas: dance. When we see him move, we see something utterly unique. But that style wasn't born in a vacuum. It was a meticulously crafted synthesis of the artist he deconstructed. He was a student of history, spending countless hours watching old footage, not just of one dancer, but of a whole library of them. His most obvious influence was James Brown. As a child, Michael would be glued to the television, watching James Brown perform, mimicking every step and absorbing his raw electric energy. He saw how Brown commanded a stage, how he used grunts and shrieks as percussive accents, how he could slide and spin as if possessed by the rhythm. He saw the Godfather of Soul as a master of energy, and he wanted to understand that energy on a molecular level. But he didn't stop there. He also deconstructed the elegance of Fred Astaire. While James Brown was fire, Astaire was I. Michael studied Astaire's effortless grace, the way he told stories with his body, and how he integrated his movements seamlessly with the music. His autobiography, Moonwalk, was even dedicated to Fred Astaire. He saw how Astaire used every part of the frame, turning a simple coat rack into a dance partner. It was about precision, narrative, and style. And then he went even further, studying masters of illusion like the French mime Marcel Marceau. From Marceau, he learned the art of creating invisible forces, how to make an audience believe he was pushing against a gust of wind or trapped inside a box. This wasn't about dance steps, it was about creating a physical reality out of thin air. This is the key. He didn't just copy one person. He took the explosive energy of Brown, the sophisticated grace of Astaire, and the illusory power of Marceau, and he synthesized them. He cross-pollinated their techniques to create something that was entirely his own. The perfect case study for this is his most iconic move, the moonwalk. Now, Michael Jackson did not invent the moonwalk. The move, originally called the backslide, had been performed by dancers for decades, with tap dancer Billy Bailey showcasing a version of it as early as 1943. It was a group of dancers, however, who were instrumental in teaching it to Michael. Dancers like Jeffrey Daniel, who performed the backslide on shows like Soul Train and Top of the Pop, along with Jerron Casper Candidate and Derek Cooley Jackson, worked with Michael to teach him the mechanics. But here's where the Michael Jackson method kicks in. He didn't just learn the move, he deconstructed it, perfected it, and contextualized it. He took the raw mechanic of the backslide, applied the smoothness he learned from studying Astaire, and then unveiled it at the perfect dramatic moment during his performance of Billie Jean at Motown 25. He turned a dance step into a global phenomenon. Even after that legendary performance, his first question to Jeffrey Daniel was, "How was it?" When Daniel expressed awe, Michael's reply was, "It still didn't come out right." This is the mind of a student who is never satisfied. He applied this same deconstruction to his music. He famously said, "Ever since I was a little boy, I would study composition. And it was Tchaikovsky that influenced me the most. If you take an album like the Nutcracker Suite, every song is a killer, every one. So I said to myself, why can't there be a pop album where every song is a killer?" He was deconstructing classical music to understand how to create a flawless, no-filler album. He did the same with his voice. His signature hiccups, hee-hees, and percussive gasps were a result of deconstructing not just singers, but the entire rhythmic landscape of a song. He turned his voice into another percussive instrument. This was honed through years of work with vocal coaches, most famously the legendary Seth Riggs, whose sessions revealed a meticulous process of drilling scales and exercises. He treated his voice not as a gift, but as a finely tuned instrument that required constant study. So, how do you apply this? First, pick the skill you want to master. Writing, coding, public speaking, cooking, anything. Second,
Identify the greats. But don't just pick one. Find at least 3 to 5 masters, preferably with different styles. If you want to be a great writer, don't just read Stephen King. Read King for storytelling, Hemingway for conciseness, and Ursula Le Guin for world building. Third, deconstruct. Don't just passively consume their work. Break it down. If it's a speech, transcribe it. What's the hook? How is it structured? Where does the speaker pause? If it's code, don't just copy and paste. Analyze its architecture. Why was this function written this way? Create a swipe file or a study notebook. Fill it with the techniques, patterns, and principles you're uncovering. You're not building a collection of things to copy. You're building a library of tools. This is the first pillar, but understanding the theory is only the beginning.
The next pillar is where theory is hammered into skill. Relentless repetition in isolation. Pillar 2. Relentless repetition in isolation, forging perfection in private. If obsessive deconstruction is gathering the blueprints, relentless repetition in isolation is building the house, brick by painstaking brick. This is the pillar that separates the dabblers from the masters. It's the unglamorous, grueling, and absolutely essential process of deliberate practice. It's the work that happens when nobody is watching. Michael Jackson understood a fundamental truth. Greatness is forged in private so it can be revealed in public. The effortless ease we saw on stage was an illusion, bought with thousands of hours of solitary, repetitive work. His collaborator Brad Buxer said of him, "If you don't sweat, there's nothing." Why is practicing in isolation so critical? Because an audience changes everything. Even just the fear of judgment is enough. When you practice in private, you give yourself permission to fail. You can try a move and fall. You can attempt a vocal run and crack. You can write a line of code that breaks everything. This freedom to be imperfect is the non-negotiable price of great work. Isolation removes the ego and lets you focus purely on the mechanics. Michael lived this philosophy. There are countless stories of him renting out large, empty ballrooms with nothing but a wooden dance floor and a mirror. There, for hours on end, he would drill the individual components he had deconstructed from the greats. He wasn't practicing the Thriller choreography from start to finish. He was practicing a single spin 50 times, a single foot shuffle 100 times, a single head snap until it was seared into his muscle memory. He was engaging in what experts call overlearning. He repeated the moves so many times they moved from his conscious mind to his subconscious. The goal was to make the execution automatic, so that on stage, under immense pressure, he didn't have to think about the moves. His body just knew. This freed up his mind to focus on performance, emotion, and connecting with the crowd. The magic was simply the result of a militant devotion to repetition. This same fanatical repetition was the hallmark of his studio work. The story of mixing Billie Jean is legendary. Engineer Bruce Sweden recalls they did 91 mixes of the song. Think about that. Not 9, but 91. Each one, a slight variation, a tiny tweak of the EQ on the bass, a fractional change in the reverb. Most artists would have been satisfied at mix 5, maybe 10. Michael and Quincy Jones pushed it to 91, only to circle back to mix number 2 because it had that smelly jelly, Quincy's term for undeniable magic. Sweden also noted Michael's incredible preparation before he even sang a note. "I never remember recording Michael with the lyrics in front of him," Sweden stated. "He would stay up the night before memorizing the song or songs we were about to record. He repeated the words until they were no longer just lyrics on a page, but a part of him." Sweden also recalls that Michael often recorded his vocals in complete darkness to remove all distractions and focus solely on the emotion and delivery. Another engineer, Brad Sundberg, shared a similar insight. Michael used to show up 2 hours early for every single vocal session just to warm up. No other artist I am aware of does that, nor has that type of self-discipline. While others were saving their voices, Michael was preparing his instrument with hours of meticulous, repetitive drills. This is the second pillar, and it's the most demanding. It's the part that motivation hacks can't solve. It requires pure discipline. but it is also the most direct path to acquiring a skill. Here is your how-to for applying this pillar. First, schedule dedicated, sacred time for isolated practice. Put it in your calendar like a non-negotiable appointment. No multitasking, phone off, browser tabs closed. This is your time to be alone with the skill. Second, embrace the power of reps. Don't just practice the whole thing, break it down and drill the weakest parts. Learning to guitar? Don't just play the song, practice the one difficult chord change over and over and over. Learning to write? Write 20 different opening sentences. The goal is to build fluency at the micro level. Third, learn to love the process of being bad. This is the biggest hurdle. We are so afraid of looking foolish that we never push ourselves into the zone of discomfort where learning actually happens. Your isolated practice space is your sanctuary for failure. Celebrate the mistakes, because each one is a data point telling you what to adjust. Deconstruction gives you knowledge, but it's relentless repetition that turns knowledge into ability. It's the sweat equity of genius. But there's one more layer. To truly accelerate your learning, you have to make the skill your entire world. This brings us to the third pillar, total immersion. Pillar 3. Total immersion, building a world around the skill. The third and final pillar of the Michael Jackson method is total immersion. This is the principle of making the skill you're learning not just something you do, but something you live. It's about blurring the lines between practice and life, creating an environment where you are constantly surrounded by your chosen focus. The idea behind immersion is that it lets your brain work on the problem in the background. When you're constantly feeding your mind information related to your skill, it starts making connections subconsciously. You'll get insights in the shower, or solutions will pop into your head on a walk. Learning is no longer confined to the 2 hours you set aside. It's happening all the time. Michael Jackson was a master of this. When he was working on an album, it became his entire reality. His collaborator Bruce Sweden described their process for finishing the Dangerous album. We'd drive to the studio and work until we couldn't work anymore. Then we'd drive back to the hotel, go to sleep, and then go back in the morning and hit it again. This wasn't a 9-to-5 job. It was a total surrender to the creative process. The creation of Thriller is the ultimate case study in immersion. Michael's stated goal was to create an album where every song was a killer, inspired by Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite. To achieve this, the studio became his universe. He and the team, led by Quincy Jones, reportedly listened to nearly 600 songs before selecting the ones they would work on. The team worked around the clock in a world of sound, rhythm, and a relentless pursuit of perfection. But immersion didn't stop with the music. When it came time to create the short film for Thriller, Michael had recently seen An American Werewolf in London and was fascinated by the transformation sequences. So what did he do? He immersed himself in the world of horror cinema. He called the film's director John Landis out of the blue and pitched his idea. He wanted to turn into a monster. Landis recalls showing Michael books filled with pictures of classic movie monsters, only to discover that Michael had seen almost none of them. So they embarked on a crash course. Michael didn't just want a music video with scary elements. He wanted to understand the language of horror and blend it with music and dance. He was building a world, and for that period, he lived inside the monster movie genre. It was total immersion, and the result changed music forever. This immersion also extended to his mindset. Michael was a firm believer in affirmations and visualization. He famously wrote his goals on mirrors. His brother Jermaine recalled seeing Thriller, 100 million sales, sell-out stadiums, written across the top of a bathroom mirror. These weren't just hopeful wishes, they were commands. They were a way of immersing his subconscious mind in the reality he was determined to create. In his own words, he described it, "I look in the mirror and I would say over and over to myself, I'd take a deep breath and I'd say, biggest selling album of all time, greatest seller, over and over to my mind, and look in my eyes, and I'd mean it." He was creating an internal environment of unwavering belief. This is the third pillar, and it's about creating a holistic learning ecosystem. Here is the how-to for you.
First, create your immersion bubble. Learning a new language? Change your phone's OS to that language. Switch the audio on your favorite Netflix shows. Listen to music in that language on your commute. Let it seep into the cracks of your day. Second, curate your information diet. Actively change what you consume. If you want to learn about finance, your podcast feed should be filled with finance podcasts. Your YouTube subscriptions should be channels about investing. Your bookshelf should have the seminal works on the topic. Third, find your tribe. Immerse yourself in the community of people who are also obsessed with the skill. Join the relevant subreddits, find the Discord servers, go to local meetups. When you're surrounded by people who speak the language of your chosen skill, your learning accelerates exponentially. Finally, create your internal environment. Use affirmations just like Michael. Write your primary goal on a sticky note and put it on your bathroom mirror or your phone's lock screen. This isn't mystical thinking, it's a psychological technique to keep your goals top of mind and prime your brain to notice related opportunities. When you combine obsessive deconstruction, relentless repetition in isolation, and total immersion, you create a powerful flywheel for learning. You study the greats, you drill their techniques, and you live inside the world of your skill. This is the blueprint. Synthesize and apply. The bridge to the viewer. So we've broken down the 3 pillars: obsessive deconstruction, relentless repetition in isolation, and total immersion. When you synthesize them, they create a simple, powerful learning loop. Think of it like this: study, practice, live.
Study. Find the masters and break down what they do into its core parts. Practice. Take those parts and drill them relentlessly in private until they become second nature. Live. Build a world around the skill, immersing your conscious and subconscious mind in it 24/7. This isn't just for becoming a pop superstar. It's a universal framework you can apply to anything. Let's make this tangible. Imagine you want to become a successful programmer and land a job at a top tech company. Learning to code is too vague. Let's apply the Michael Jackson way. Step 1. Obsessive deconstruction. Study. Instead of random tutorials, you identify the greats. In this case, that means great projects and great engineers. You find open source projects on GitHub known for elegant, efficient code. You don't just read it, you deconstruct it. Why this data structure? What design patterns are they using? You read the documentation, the comments, the pull requests. You are reverse engineering excellence. You also follow top engineers on social media and read their blogs to understand their thinking process. Step 2. Relentless repetition in isolation. Practice. Now you drill what you've deconstructed. You don't just build one big project. You solve 100 algorithm challenges on a site like LeetCode, focusing on repetition to master common patterns. You spend your Saturday mornings alone with your computer, not trying to build the next Facebook, but trying to perfectly implement a binary search algorithm until you can do it in your sleep. You are building the muscle memory of coding. Step 3. Total immersion. This is where you go from hobbyist to someone who lives and breathes code. Your podcast queue is filled with shows like Syntax and The Changelog. Your YouTube feed is all conference talks. You join a Discord community for your programming language, asking and answering questions. You write your goals, land a job at Google, contribute to a major open source project on a sticky note, and put it on your monitor. You are no longer just a person learning to code, you are becoming a coder. This loop, study, practice, live, is the engine. It takes that vague dream of getting good at something and turns it into a concrete daily system of action. You're no longer waiting for motivation, you are executing the blueprint. This is how you bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. What was Michael Jackson's real secret? It wasn't a mystical gift, it was a blueprint. It was a profound understanding that greatness isn't born, it's built. It's built through the intellectual rigor of studying the masters, the unglamorous discipline of repetitive practice, and the fanatical devotion of total immersion. His genius is not an excuse for us to sit back in awe. It's a roadmap. It is a challenge. It tells us that the potential for mastery lies within anyone willing to commit to the process. Michael Jackson once said, "Work like there's no tomorrow. Train, strive, really train and cultivate your talent to the highest degree. Be the best at what you do." That is a call to action. The path isn't easy. It requires sacrifice, discipline, and obsession that might look strange to the outside world. But the blueprint is clear. Deconstruct, rehearse, immerse. The system is what carries you through when inspiration fades. It's what turns amateur interest into professional skill. The true legacy of Michael Jackson isn't just the timeless music or the iconic videos. It's the powerful demonstration of human potential unleashed. It's a testament to the idea that with a ferocious work ethic and a systematic approach, you can architect your own greatness. If you found this deep dive valuable and want more breakdowns of the methods behind the masters, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Your support helps us create more content just like this. And let us know in the comments, which genius should we deconstruct next?